Hi, I'm Frank Kane, and I spent 9 years at Amazon.com as a senior engineer and as a senior manager. These days, I'm a popular online instructor in the fields of data science and big data, and a lot of my students ask for advice on how to get a job in the field. Now, when I was at Amazon, I was also what's called a bar raiser. That means that I ran meetings deciding whether or not to hire people all across the company, and I had veto authority over hiring decisions at Amazon. I interviewed literally thousands of people and hired hundreds, and so I know a lot about what it takes to get hired by Amazon. I also know what it takes to get hired by Google because I went through the interview process with them at one point myself and actually got a job offer from them. I learned that Google's hiring process is actually very similar to Amazon's, and probably to most big tech companies for that matter. So the advice I can offer for Amazon largely applies to Google as well. As you know, getting hired as an engineer at Amazon or Google is not easy, but here are some tips to get you through the process. Tip number 1, don't interview before you're ready. If you're totally new to the world of engineering and you just took a course online but have no real-world experience yet, don't waste your time. You need to get some experience solving real-world problems first so you can demonstrate that you don't just know stuff, but you can apply it as well to problems that you've never seen before. Now, if you're still in school, doing some meaningful internships is hugely important. And it's also important to do some work that you can point to that you did as an individual and not just in a team. If you're out of school, try doing some freelance work or online challenges or contribute to open source projects to at least get some practice in what you can do and demonstrate that you have enough passion and initiative to seek out those opportunities. If you're out of school, think about doing some freelance work. There are freelance platforms such as Experfy that specialize in the sorts of skills Amazon and Google are looking for. Try applying as a consultant there and see where it leads. If you're in the field of data science, go create an account on Kaggle. It's easy to do, as you can see here. People who win machine learning competitions on Kaggle often end up with lots of job offers just based on that alone. Recruiters kind of hang out there looking for promising individuals. You can also contribute to open source projects, so getting your name attached to a relevant project on Github is also a great way to attract recruiters. They search on there a lot too, and getting started on Github is pretty easy too. And unless you're graduating from a top-tier school known for software or data engineering, Amazon or Google probably isn't going to be your first job. It makes sense to build up some experience at a smaller company somewhere first. That's how I got in. Tip number 2, know someone. Amazon gets so many resume submissions, nobody has time to go through them all. So just submitting a resume online is probably just going to get you ignored. Instead, look for local recruiting events where you can sign up for interviews and apply for them there. Search your social networks to see if you know anybody who works there already. If you can submit your resume as an employee referral through someone you know that already works there, it's almost guaranteed to get looked at by a hiring manager. Now, if you don't know anyone, do some research as to who a manager might be who is looking for someone like you. Track them down and ask for an informational interview where you just want to learn more about what their team does and what sorts of skills they're looking for. You never know where that might lead. Tip number 3, use LinkedIn and Github. It's much more likely that someone hired by Amazon or Google was found by them and not the other way around. So make it easy for Amazon and Google to find you. Make sure your LinkedIn profile exists, that it's up to date, and it's compelling. If you've done open source work, make sure they can find you through GitHub or other means. Publications are also a good way to get discovered by recruiters at big tech companies like Amazon and Google. Tip number 4, practice thinking on your feet. Depending on the team, you'll be subjected to 1 or 2 phone interviews and/or some sort of online assessment depending on the team and the level you're applying at. And you have to go through that before they'll decide whether to fly you in for an interview. So solving problems on the fly while someone's watching you can be really nerve-wracking, and it's a good idea to conduct mock interviews with someone you know first. So although I hated them as a hiring manager, there are tons of websites out there that are just a Google search away that will give you lots of sample interview questions for pretty much any engineering job you can dream up. And some of them are specific to specific companies too. So you may as well use them and prepare yourself. Odds are you won't be asked the same exact questions, but what's important is being able to tackle them on the fly quickly. Often your interviewer is more interested in your thought process as you tackle a given problem than whether you got the right answer. So be vocal as you work and think your way through each problem. If you are brought in for an interview, you'll probably be asked to code or architect things on a whiteboard. It's also good to practice this ahead of time, as writing code on a whiteboard takes some getting used to. If you'll be evaluated on coding, One simple question I like to give people was reverse the words in a string, so try using that for a practice exercise. Tip number 5, understand the company's values. At Amazon in particular, they have a set of leadership principles that are very important to them. Part of your interview will be assessing whether you exemplify these principles. So be prepared to offer examples of how you have demonstrated these principles in your past work. Number 1 is customer obsession, for example. So think about times you solved a problem thinking about the end user's experience first and designing a solution with that experience as your primary concern. Amazon calls this working backwards from the customer, and it's a very different approach than working forwards from some specific technology that you just want to use. If you're given an open-ended problem during your interviews, always think about it first from the standpoint of the customer, and you'll be guaranteed to get some bonus points that way. Here is the complete list of Amazon's leadership principles. Customer obsession. We talked about that already. Ownership. Demonstrate that you think about the welfare of your organization as a whole and not just some narrowly focused job that you do. Invent and simplify. Have you ever come up with something new? Well, be ready to talk about that. And keep in mind, Amazon values simplicity in its technologies and has a distaste for overly complex systems that are difficult to maintain. Are right a lot. If you're later in your career, think about times where your intuition proved to be correct. But you should also be someone who admits what you don't know and seek diverse opinions from others in that case. Learn and be curious. This is essential for engineers. Think of all the times that you have taught yourself a new skill on your own initiative and be ready to talk about it. Hire and develop the best. If you're not new to industry, how have you helped your peers to grow? Insist on the highest standards. Think of a time where something just wasn't good enough, and so you made it better. Think big. Have you ever come up with a big idea that wasn't some narrowly focused technical solution? Bias for action. This is also an important one for engineers. They want people who take initiative and don't just do what they are told. Frugality. You're unlikely to be questioned on this during an interview, but Amazon doesn't usually like throwing large amounts of people or money at a problem if they don't have to. Earn trust. Do your peers trust you because you're a good listener and self-critical and candid and treat others with respect? This sort of falls under the being a good team player category. Dive deep. If you've ever dug into a problem only to uncover a much deeper one that you ended up solving instead, that's also a good story to have ready. Have backbone, disagree, and commit. So think of times where you didn't initially agree with a decision and you voiced your opinion, but ultimately committed to it if that was the final decision. Deliver results. This is last, but perhaps the most important. Amazon and Google both want people who are an order of magnitude more productive than most engineers because they are driven, focused, and know what they are doing. So be prepared to talk about your more impressive accomplishments and how long it took you to do them. Google has a similar set of core values as well. If you search for 10 things we know to be true, you'll find them. A lot of them are very similar to Amazon's, like focus on the user and all else will follow. That's one of them, as is fast is better than slow. But on the whole, you'll find Google's values to be a bit more about philosophy than how employees should behave. And they're less likely to dig into them in an interview, in my experience. Tip number 6, know what to expect. If your resume and tailored cover letter gets the attention of a recruiter and a hiring manager, the next step will be a phone screen or an online assessment, depending on the team and the level you're applying for. If it's an assessment online, be prepared. Practice doing lots of coding challenges or design challenges, whatever is appropriate to the role you're being considered for. You'd be amazed how many applicants just freeze up completely at this stage. It got so bad that for a while, I started candidates to code up a problem called FizzBuzz on their first interview. It's just this. Write some code that iterates through the numbers 1 through 100. If the number is an even multiple of 3, print fizz, and if it's an even multiple of 5, print buzz. You would be amazed how many people can't do this. Even though FizzBuzz is a widely known screening problem, people just don't know how to do it. So don't be the person who bombs FizzBuzz. If you're brought in for an in-house interview, make sure you get plenty of rest the night before. Do whatever it takes to ensure that. And an extra coffee or a Red Bull before heading in is probably a good idea, because the day's going to be exhausting. Expect 5 or so interviews, plus lunch that's probably with a manager. And like we talked about, you should be comfortable coding and solving problems at a whiteboard. Likely problems that are the sorts of problems that Amazon or Google really face in the real world. And you should have stories ready to demonstrate that you exhibit the leadership principles of the company. You can't practice enough for this. Oh, and for God's sake, take a shower before you head in and use deodorant. It's going to be a stressful day, and there's nothing worse than doing an interview with someone who stinks. Yes, that's really happened to me, more than once. Be ready for "do you have any questions for me?" at the end of each interview. If you just shrug, that doesn't really demonstrate a real curiosity about the job. So ask for more information about what your interviewer does and what success looks like in their role. That's always a good idea. Also, know your audience. If you're being interviewed by an engineer, you know their job is probably to evaluate your technical skills primarily, so focus on that. If you're being interviewed by a manager, your soft skills and leadership principles are going to be more important to talk about. Now, this might be your future boss you're talking to, or it might be the bar raiser, remember that was me, who has even more influence over the decision over whether or not you get hired. If you need a restroom break or another cup of coffee, don't be afraid to take the interviewer up on that at the beginning of the interview. You want to stay in top form throughout the day. Tip number 7, stay communicative. If you provided an email address on your resume, then for God's sake, remember to check your email regularly. If you listed a phone number, check your phone messages. A lot of people these days just communicate through text and social media, and they ignore these more traditional lines of communication. Don't be the person who misses that email asking to schedule an interview with you, or even worse, who misses a phone message with an actual job offer after your interview's done. This really happens. Amazon typically moves pretty quickly after your interviews. Your hiring decision meeting will probably take place within a few days, and if they decide to extend an offer, you'll hear about it right away. Google, at least when I went through the process, can take longer, so be more patient with them. But don't be afraid to contact your recruiter and find out where things stand. There's probably a lot more I could talk about, but that's enough for now, I think. I hope these tips make you better prepared if you're thinking of interviewing at Amazon or Google or really any big tech company for that matter. Good luck! Thanks for watching. If you'd like to learn more, check out my Ultimate Hands-on Hadoop course on Udemy. In it, you'll learn over 25 different technologies in the Hadoop ecosystem and build up a powerful arsenal against your big data. Just use the coupon code in the description below and you'll get a large and special discount. See you there.